Welcome to another edition of the A Trek Within podcast. I'm your host, Rob Sullivan. Very excited today. We have two great guests, George Sewell and Dan Baldwin. They're co-authors of a couple of books we're going to talk about. One is called Paranormal Pendulum 3, and one is called Sky People. And the Sky People one is the most recent, and it gets into the connection that many of our, the ancient cultures on the planet have had with people from outer space, because many times they will reference that. And I'm going to let them open up and talk about that. But without further ado, let's jump in. All right. George, Dan, good to see you guys. Thank you for taking time. I'm going to let's start out with just a quick introduction from each of you to give everybody a sense of, your background, how you got into this, and then we'll go from there. So Dan, why don't we let you start?
Okay, well, basically, I'm a writer, full-time writer, novelist. I do a lot of ghostwriting for other people. And in the past couple of decades, I've been involved with paranormal research using a technique called Pendulum Dowsing. And I've written a number of books on the subject. And then George and I got together and we started using Pendulum Dowsing as a research tool instead of just, where can you find the water in the North 40, or where's the Lost Dutchman mine? George and I started using the technique to, research history. And some of that history involves the spirit world, UFOs, other galaxies, other dimensions, that sort of thing. And that's where our books kind of evolved from.
I love that. And that was one of the cool things about the paranormal pendulum. The spirituality aspect, yes. Incarnation aspect, the UFOs, obviously. So there's, it's fascinating. I love it. George.
Yeah. For many years, I was with the Mutual UFO Network as the assistant state director in Louisiana, and had the opportunity to chat with a number of folks who had some personal encounter with the whatever that phenomenon is. And I began noticing a lot of consistencies, different people, different places, different time frame, but pretty much they were describing a very, very similar experience or event. And although there's great literature out there researching this topic, I had not heard of any topic that used the pendulum as a research tool. So that got my attention, and I said, Dan, I've got this Shreveport woman, Lindsay Higgins, who has a lifelong history of these encounters and events. Let's use the pendulum as the research tool to see if we can learn what the heck is going on with Lindsay Higgins. And so we spent about 2 years in that process, and the result is the book Paranormal Pendulum 3, the Lindsay Higgins story.
That you did the deep dive on that, because too often it seems people there's an experience and then there's a newspaper article and then it just kind of disappears and you never hear much more about it. And the fact that you dug into it that much, that's fascinating. Let's start out, for the people who don't know what it is or how it's been used, let's talk about that, and then we'll look at how you used it in that case, because it's fascinating.
Well, I'll jump in with how it works, and then George can say how it worked in that particular case. Basically, dowsing goes back, at least as far as the ancient Egyptians. I mean, it's been a technique that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And normally it's used in terms of, again, your viewers are probably familiar with the old farmer with the old witching stick out looking for water in the North 40, and when he's over the water hole, the stick will turn down, and that's where the water is. It's the same principle with pendulum dowsing, except you're using a weight on a string. And essentially, the way the process works, I'm kind of boiling this down, but your conscious mind focuses on the weight, and as it spins around, that frees up your subconscious mind, which contacts the great beyond. And in our case, the great beyond includes ET and people from the spirit world. And simply, it's a great research tool. It's a bit slow because you have to ask yes or no questions. But unlike a lot of psychic work, there's no interpretation involved. In other words, if If you swing it to the right, that's a yes. If you swing it to the left, that's a no. If it goes back and forth, you need to rephrase the question. So there's no ambiguity in it. And through a series of yes/no type questions, you can get incredibly detailed information about any particular subject. Ranging from where did I lose my car keys to what's the nature of the universe. It's an incredible tool.
Interesting. Now, I had an old girlfriend who used to do that, and we do it with like chakra type stuff, which is kind of interesting to see how it's been. My question, though, or just to clarify for the benefit of people watching, when the spinning is not controlled by you, it's not like you're turning it, you're holding it, and it spins on its own, correct?
Not exactly. When you're holding it, the muscles in your fingers actually are controlling it. What makes it special is your subconscious mind is controlling your fingers. So, instead of your conscious mind doing it, your subconscious mind is doing it. For example, if I want to get a yes answers, Dan, am I going to win the lottery this weekend? Hey, that's my conscious mind at work, because I want that to happen. All right, you got that?
Yeah.
If I let my subconscious mind answer the question, Dan, am I going to win the lottery this weekend? And that's your basic hell no. But that's the subconscious mind at work. The difference is with the conscious mind, you can control the answers. Like, am I looking for missing person work? You want the person to be alive. So if you think the missing person is alive, your conscious mind controls this, and you get a yes. But if the person is as in so many cases, deceased, your subconscious mind will go, nope, sorry. You're looking for remains instead of a living person. It makes all the difference in the world.
Interesting. Let's talk about some of the missing people and how you've used it in those cases.
Well, yeah, in one case, I use a technique that I call shrinking the box. In other words, we're looking for a missing person. This was many years ago, but the person told us, the family called and said, the missing person is either in Arizona or New Mexico or Utah or Colorado. That's your search area. So that's your box. So immediately, I started asking, is the person missing in Arizona? I got a yes. That shrinks down your box. And is the person in northern Arizona? Got a yes. That shrinks down the box. Is this missing person east of I-17? Yes. That shrinks down the box. Eventually, by asking yes or no questions, you can get down to, in this particular case, is he north of Highway 260? Got a yes. Is he south of this particular farm to market road? Got a yes. Is he east of this road, west of that road? Got a yes. I finally got it down to a 1 mile stretch of a back road, a state road, logging road, basically. Got it down to a 1 mile stretch, and I told him, I said, if you go to this particular spot and go 50 yards to the west and walk a mile, you will encounter the missing person. And of course, the searchers went to that particular spot, and they went to the X marks the spot, walked off 50 yards, and unfortunately, he was deceased, but they found him at that particular spot. And one of the benefits of working with pendulum dowsing is you can get so specific. You can get latitude and longitude, or you can get street addresses by simply a process of elimination. One of the problems police have with working with psychics is they can give them beautiful information, totally accurate information that they cannot use. For example, in this case, we had one of the psychics working that case came up with a precise description of where we found the body. I mean, it was precise, but it fit hundreds of thousands of locations in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. I mean, you had to know that place to find that place. With the pendulum dowsing, I was able to narrow the box down to get into a specific road that got them to that place where all the clues came together, and we found the missing person.
Now, when you go the subconscious being the thing that would control it in that case, because obviously you consciously didn't know that's where they were.
Yeah.
Say more about how that part of it, what's your theory on how that works?
Well, basically, your subconscious mind is one of the most powerful things in the universe. It allows you to connect directly with what I would call the other side. And you can, everybody has a definition of the other side. God, the universe, the great unknown, whatever, however you want to define it. Your subconscious can connect with that. And the information that you want to know is out there. It's just a matter of trying to find it and bringing it in.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And one of the benefits in dealing with the spirit world and with, I believe, with the ET phenomenon is this, for example, the spirit world, again, this is theory, but they work at such a higher frequency that it's hard for them to communicate on the earthly plane. The subconscious mind is not limited by that slow process. So it's able to contact the spirit. The contact back and forth between human and the spirit world is much easier. And I think the same applies to working with the ETs, because the information we have from them is that they work telepathically. So you're dealing mind to mind instead of vocal to vocal. And that's how we got into the Lindsay Higgins thing. I think that was really helpful with that case.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that, because if I remember that correctly, you used the dowsing and you also worked with mediums, and then you had two different people dowsing back to back, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk about that a bit. That was that's
one of the controls that Dan and I use in order to validate the information we get from the pendulum is to say we have a list of questions that we have researched and we have our responses. Okay, fine. We have a colleague who's also a very skilled dowser, and we will have someone read those questions to him and check what response he gets from his pendulum. And there's only been one instance where he had a different response from what Dan and I got. And it turned out that the difference was just a matter of a definition of a word. So it was really close. So we do seek validation for the information, certainly before we present it in any sort of a public forum. But it's an amazing process. And as Dan alluded, the practitioner has to be very skilled in the question, because the question turns out to be everything. And it takes a lot of personal discipline to narrow down a scope of information that you may be seeking into a series of very, very simple, focused questions. So it's a great clarifying process for the practitioner. A little tedious, but if you've got the patience, you can get some really good information.
Interesting. So this just occurred to me. I don't know how much. I'm going to try to phrase this in a way that makes sense. But when you're doing the dowsing, as an example, is it correct to think of it as, okay, the spirit world, and you're just accessing it, as opposed to when you're connecting with a particular spirit who, is giving the information? The reason I ask that question is because there are, spirits that are, I want to say, better than others, and so if you've got one who wants to give you intentionally bad information, I could see that screwing things up a bit. But if you're pulling it from like a collective unconscious, that issue. So talk about that. What's wrong with my thinking on that?
Yeah. The way we work, we deal with kind of all of the above. In a lot of our work, we're dealing directly with, again, the great unknown, the Akashic records, however you want to define that. But also in some of the more specific work, we're dealing with specific individual spirits or individual occupants of an extraterrestrial or extra interdimensional craft. So it works kind of across the board. The question is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say a good example would be Lindsay Higgins. The bulk of the information we received from the spirit world was from her favorite aunt, who is now deceased, but she was very close to her aunt most of her life. Aunt Belle. And Belle was more than eager to give us all sorts of information about Lindsay growing up and her experiences, which Belle was aware of. So she kind of confirmed that a lot of what Lindsay was reporting was in fact something that at that time Aunt Belle was very much aware of it as well. So whoever has the information, they tend to come forward. We don't go looking for people specifically, but the information will present itself, and very often it will be via a personality that we recognize.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that helps, because I was just trying to figure that piece out, because I remember in one of the interviews where I saw you guys, I think it was in the Southwest, and it walked into like a haunted house or something and said, come forth. And my first thought was, and I'm maybe misquoting you on how you did that, but as I heard that, I remember thinking that's a little of, you could be inviting somebody who's not particularly nice.
The way we work it, we don't do seances. In other words, we don't sit down and spirit, Cleopatra, please come visit us.
Yeah.
Our technique is whoever needs to visit us on this particular point, we would appreciate you showing up. That's our technique. And normally, we've never had a bad experience. Now we have run into a few playful spirits. We have one W.D. Woodworth who kept popping up during the Lindsay Higgins investigation. He was quite a character back in the 1800s. Enjoyed his whiskey, enjoyed his cards, and enjoyed dropping in and visiting with us. But he was connected to the Lindsay Higgins case. But again, in terms of negative spirits, I know there's negativity out there. We don't go looking for it, therefore we don't encounter it. Don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, just as we would in our regular lives. I mean, we don't seek out negative people. We don't seek out, people who are doing things we wouldn't want to be involved with. So same process.
No, certainly. I like that, the idea of, anybody who's got helpful information come forward makes more sense to me, as opposed to the seance blank slate sort of, who's in the room. Yeah. Could be anybody.
Yeah. And that comes, Rob, from the fact that we're researching. Okay. Yeah. We're not seeking entertainment, or we're not just, what's going on? That we have a specific purpose in using this tool, and it tends to be very, very useful.
Yeah, no, and that made perfect sense to me. I wanted to clarify that point only because there might be some people watching going, well, what's the difference? And there is a difference, clearly. So talk about the Lindsay Higgins case and how that all came about, because that to me is just incredible, that whole experience.
Yeah.
Wow. Lindsay Higgins, Shreveport woman, just out of the blue one night called me. It turns out we had a mutual friend, and the mutual friend was aware of my interest in the Mutual UFO Network and the paranormal and whatnot. And she was aware of Lindsay's lifelong history of encounters. And she suggested, well, Lindsay, maybe you ought to talk to George. And Lindsay was reaching a point in her life where she's been sitting on this, for many, many decades, and she just had to do something. And one of the things she did was she just wrote up a summary of her experiences, and she started shooting them out. And it was picked up by a producers group on the West Coast, and they were fascinated with it. And this was the group that was going to be doing productions for what was then Netflix's series based on these kind of encounters. And once they learned of Lindsay's story, they said, we want this one. We want this one. So they flew Lindsay out to Los Angeles, and I went along as kind of a technical advisor, and they got the Lindsay story, and it was broadcast on Netflix on the series Haunted, first season, episode 5. And any of you viewers, they can access Netflix Haunted, first season, episode 5. They can see Lindsay telling her story, and she's a very articulate person, and she can really describe her story. And one particular event that occurred when she was in college was beautifully recreated in this Netflix episode. It was an event where she was in her room. She had an apartment, her own apartment, when she was in college. In her room, up late studying. Okay, fine. It's 2:00. Okay, I better get some sleep. So she lays down and go to sleep, and immediately her wall dissolves. I mean, it just dissolves. And then this kind of gets her attention, and then she starts elevating. And as she approaches the ceiling, then she starts moving towards where the wall used to be. And she's not having any of this, so she reaches out and grabs her ceiling fan. That's not going to stop it, and she's just pulled out and eventually into a craft. Sometime later, she has no exact idea how long. She's back in her room. She pulls her dresser over by the foot of the bed, crawls up on top of the dresser so she can look at the ceiling fan. And you've got the upper dusty side of the fan, and you got these very definite finger streak marks. So
Wow.
That pretty well got her attention, that this is a physical event. It's not a dream or imagination or something like that. So she does have this kind of evidence of the physical nature of some of these encounters, as well as metaphysical or non-physical.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she also had the typical strange marks on the body after the events. The rectangular dots or whatever. She had that that phenomenon also. And George and I worked on this for about 2 years, and I need to point out that we not only worked directly with Lindsay and through Pendulum Dowsing, but we went through newspaper records, interviewed family members and friends and family, and pretty much across the board confirmed everything she was telling us.
And that the pendulum was also presenting. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That must have been terrifying for her. Wow.
That's why she sat on it for so long and reached the point where I can't sit on this anymore. And
let me point out something real quick. That's one of the reasons for the book. One of the reasons behind the motivation for, at least for George and I writing the book, is there are a lot of people out there in Lindsay's position. This strange thing has happened to them. They know what's happened to them, and that they can't go to the cops. They can't go to the family members. They can't go to their priest or their preacher because they'll be considered loopy. And one of the reasons we wrote the book is to tell people out there in that position, you are not alone. There are a lot of people going through exactly what you're going through and have gone through what you're going through. And there are people out there who are willing to talk and willing to chat, willing to help you out. And it's in your best interest to come on out. Don't be afraid. Tell your story. Come on out there. You're not alone.
Yeah, and it's something that Dan and I did discover, and we were totally not expecting anything like this, with that Lindsay's experiences were not, I don't like the word abductions, because that implies kidnapping, a snatching, or a criminal act. And it turns out that these episodes were not random. Quite the contrary. That Lindsay has had these episodes much of her current life, and when we get into previous lives, which we did, and we it was really fascinating. We had a session where Dan and I were with Lindsay, and Lindsay was really curious about if in a previous life she had had similar experiences. Yeah. And we were able to connect Lindsay here and now with the spirit of Lindsay as she was in the previous life. So Lindsay was able to talk to herself through time, and she learned that, yes, indeed, in her previous life, she was having these visitations and these other encounters with the same group of entities. And that was well, one is kind of reassuring for her, but for me and Dan, it's, whoa, hello. This thing may have a longer history than most people suspect when you use the word abductions. And
yeah, it's more like an ongoing relationship of sorts.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, we had a primary contact on the other side, and just to recognize this particular spirit, can we call you ET? He said, sure, fine, no problem, don't worry about it. So we would have a lot of conversations with ET as he would be describing what's happening with Lindsay, both now and in the past. And we did arrive at, well, when did this begin with Lindsay? And what ET said, about 6,000 years ago on a different plane, Lindsay was approached by ET, and he explained a long-term process. I wouldn't use the word experiment because it's not an experiment, it's a process. It just takes a duration. And they would like for Lindsay to participate because she has the ability to reincarnate. And that particular cyclical component is something that would greatly enhance the overall project. And Lindsay said, sure, fine. Hey, sign me up. I'll do it. And that's what's been going on for quite a while. And when Lindsay learned that she had agreed to participate in this long-term process, that was probably the single greatest relief she had. Oh, okay, well, if I agree to do it, then sure, fine, I'll continue doing it. However, no more discomfort.
Yeah.
When she was young, she had very severe abdominal pains. She'd be in a hospital for several days. Nobody could find anything wrong. Absolutely nothing diagnosable, but she was definitely having genuine pain and discomfort. And it was somehow related to these early procedures. So she did request none of that. And oh, okay, well, we didn't know. Okay, no more.
So they honored that.
Yeah.
All right, that's great. So that's a really interesting thing. Now, when you said that she had been selected for this because she had the ability to reincarnate, implies that there are people who don't have that ability. Talk about that, because that's not something I was fully aware of.
Yeah. Something. I wrote a book called Paranormal Pendulum 2, and George was like my chief investigator on that. So we worked very closely together on that. But one of the things we discovered in interviewing spirits, and this book was about what's it like on the other side? What's the process of, do you go through the light? Is there reincarnation? Is Fido over there on the other side? That sort of thing. And one of the things we learned through many sessions is that reincarnation for many of these spirits is a matter of choice. In other words, if you definitely go through, I don't want to say a trial, but there's a life review that's pretty consistent. It's not a trial. It's not an accusatory thing. It's where you learn about your life in that incarnation, and you decide whether or not to go back and learn some more lessons. But primarily, reincarnation is something that's open to every spirit, but it's not something every spirit takes or is forced to take.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, I'm glad you clarified that, because the way that it was worded before, it sounded like there were some that just were not capable of it, as opposed to choosing not to. So that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about how you worked with mediums on this, because I found that really interesting too, the intersection of working with mediums and what they uncovered versus what you were uncovering with the dowsing.
Well, yeah, from my perspective, and I've worked with mediums in locating missing persons and working with the work George and I are doing. If you can involve a medium, and I mean a vetted medium, I don't mean the lady downtown with the neon light outside your door, readings $5. I'm talking about vetted psychics. If you can work with a qualified medium, it's extremely helpful, because they can open doors that you can't, or they can open doors faster than you can using the pendulum. It's another form of validation.
Oh, big time, because with the mediums that we were involved with, and their contact with the information was excellent. I mean, it was just incredible what they were able to convey. But at the end of the table, we have our friend with the pendulum, So he's holding the pendulum while the mediums are describing what's being presented to them. And the pendulum invariably is big time yes swing, indicating that what they are presenting is true and valid. So that's I liked that use of the pendulum as kind of a check and a balance for what we were getting from the mediums, because it was just so phenomenal.
Yeah, you touched on this earlier. George and I will sometimes, we've done this periodically just to double check our process.
Mm-hmm.
But George and I will be working with a medium, and he will sit facing this way. I will sit facing this way. The medium will be facing the other way, and we'll have another person asking the questions, so that the medium cannot see the movement of the pendulum with George and me. George and I cannot see the body language of the medium. We can't see that sort of thing. So none of the three of us can read each other, and then the other person asks the question. Invariably, we come up with the same answers.
I love it. Yeah, because that's important. Because obviously, it makes sense that you would want to not see the other people just for the verification.
Yeah, validation is extremely important to us, because it's easy to get stuff wrong. So
and
that's always double checking.
Yeah, and that's where the discipline comes in, and using the pendulum as a research tool to reach that level to where you're pretty confident that you are not subliminally influencing the response. That takes a lot of effort and over time just to reach that ability. And if you're able to do that, then the pendulum, wow, you can go with it.
The pendulum reacts to the question you're thinking, not the question you're asking. For example, am I the most handsome man on the screen? Oh, yeah. Am I going to win the lottery this weekend? Oh, yeah. Should I put beans in my chili? Oh, yeah. So whatever you're thinking is the answer you're going to get, not necessarily. I mean, if you're asking where's the missing person, and you're thinking about the beans in the chili, you're going to get the beans in the chili answer.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when you think, now it doesn't have to be Lindsay Higgins, it could be any of the things you've worked on together. What's the most surprising bit of information that really caused you to rethink what you thought about spirituality?
You want to take that first, George?
No, you take it first.
Okay. No, really, they move it a little. I would have to say, in terms of dealing with the spiritual aspect of it, is the variety of options you have when you cross over, when you get to the other side. It's not a matter of, well, here you are, here's your pitchfork, here's your wings, go knock yourself out. When you get over there, and we got this consistently across, I guess, virtually every reading where we research the subject. You arrive there. Your friends and family are there because to help ease you into to where you are, because at the moment the place is so wonderful, it's overwhelming, and you need people to just kind of calm you down. You're okay, you're in a wonderful place. The senses are basically overwhelmed, so you have all these people there waiting for you, kind of ease you into it. And once you're eased into your new location, you have all kinds of options. Like, you can stay earthbound. If you want to stick around and see what's happening to the grandkids, you can stay at that level. You can come down to earth, check in on little Johnny or little Judy May or whatever. Or you can start learning things that you've always wanted to learn. If you want to become a better musician or a musician, you can take classes. Or if, and this is the ones that interested me more, when you're ready, there are different levels of spiritual development that you can start attending. It's like seminars. If you're ready for growth spiritually, mm-hmm. There are options there for you to grow that go on and on and on and on and on. It might kind of parallel the seven heavens that you read about in the Bible or in early literature, but there are definite levels where when you're ready, you can progress. And that's what really was fascinating to me.
Yeah, what I found really intriguing when we were trying to come up with, well, okay, why is this happening to Lindsay? What is this really all about? And her participation in this long-term project, the project is an ability to reacquaint human beings with their sixth sense, which once upon a time, human beings had very active sixth sense, if you will, the ability to function on that vibrational level that we now call the other side. So the interaction between somebody in the flesh and somebody in the spirit, it's back and forth. I mean, they're still going and blowing and doing their thing. We got away from that for whatever reason. And I think we're at a point now where, as a whole, we are attempting to reconnect with that sixth sense, and also to better understand our long history involvement with that sixth sense to other life forms. That's clearly a part of it. So it's a rather exciting process.
Yeah, no doubt.
At least for me.
Well, I want to acknowledge you for answering the question that was in my mind that I hadn't yet asked. So nicely done.
Cool.
So let's talk about sky people.
I knew you were going to say that.
Lindsay that we haven't talked about. I mean, I'm sure there's a million things about Lindsay that we haven't talked about, but if there's anything that...
Well, read the book. Read the book. It's all in the book.
Yeah. So sky people, let's go there.
Well, we had finished the Lindsay Higgins book, and we felt like we were getting pretty proficient with pendulum dowsing and the process. It was really a learning process. And George and I were kicking it around one day, and I think we were talking about the Anunnaki. Over in the Middle East, the ancient ones talk about the sky people who came down and imparted knowledge to the people in the Middle East. And we said, well, hell, we've got people over here back in those days. Surely the sky people came down and visited the Native Americans. And I, clicked right away. Well, that's the Kachinas up in, Navajo and Hopi land. That's part of their culture. And we decided, well, let's start looking into the Native American cultures, and let's start interviewing Native Americans about whether or not the sky people showed up. And this is real interesting because George is in the mound building culture over in Louisiana. I'm over here in the Southwest United States in the cliff dwelling culture. So we were able to combine two entirely different cultures, sometimes at entirely different time frames, and then compare the answers. And we would go to locations and ask for, whoever can help us out with this question we're at, would you show up? And we would ask them questions. Did the sky people, were there people from the sky who came down and visited us? And we got, definite yes. And not only yes, but it was not necessarily a regular feature of their lives, but it was fairly common for the sky people to show up.
Yeah, that was one of the questions we would always ask is how were these sky people received? I mean, was this wary or a little spooky or frightening? And quite the contrary. They were welcome. They were physically interactive with the villagers. There was a lot of exchange trade, if you will, both objects and ideas. And very, very robust relationships, as it turned out.
We asked this several times. Did you perceive the sky people as God? And again, across the board, they were not considered gods. Some of the Native Americans were intimidated. They weren't fearful, but they were intimidated just by the fact that there was such an advanced culture that they were encountering. Yeah. But others, welcomed, and some of the elders or the chiefs of the shamans actually went up on trips, with the sky people. But they weren't considered as gods. They were just considered as advanced people. Mm-hmm. And speaking of spirituality, I asked one. I was speaking with a shaman, as it turned out, and I said, it turns out that the sky people attended religious ceremonies with the Native Americans. And I asked the shaman, I said, well, did this interaction with the sky people change your spiritual beliefs? And I got a definite no. With further research, he said, but it did broaden my understanding, mm-hmm. which I found interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. Did he say more about that?
Not in that session. Sometimes sometimes you get into areas where they don't want to discuss it, or maybe they can't formulate it properly. So.
Got it. Well, it says a lot about you that they've opened up to you about that, because I know that's not always, we weren't always nice.
Georgia confirmed they love to talk. Generally, they love to talk.
The spirits
the spirits love to talk. Every once in a while, you'll run into an area where you start getting a null movement on the pendulum, and sometimes that means that the person you're interviewing just doesn't know the answer. Sometimes it means I'm not ready to get the answer.
So the shaman was on the other side, is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, he was on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I thought you were interviewing. You like current day.
We were interviewing real people, but people who had crossed over, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, that sort of thing.
Okay, got it. All right. Thank you for clarifying, because I was thinking that they were more like current day people. And
we go especially out here west. We go way, way, way out to very, very isolated places where there are basically ruins. And you don't have to do that. The spirits are mobile, but I like to go to if I'm interviewing a spirit, I like to go to that spirit's location, primarily as a sign of respect and to show that I am making the effort. I can sit in my kitchen and ask a Native American to show up, but I think going up there and making the trek to a location shows a certain amount of respect and courtesy, and I think that's critical.
Yeah, not only courtesy, but it's on our end. I think it enhances the communication ability.
Oh, definitely.
I know that one of the key spots that we spent some time with is a place called Poverty Point in Northeast Louisiana, and it's a World Heritage Site. It's one of the earliest settlements in North America, and they're really not sure how far it goes back. Our clocks went back at least 4,000 years, probably earlier, but the characters that we were communicating with happened to be a shaman who was active at that site 4,000 years ago. And we got a lot of information through this individual about that particular site as it was at that time frame. And one of the notable characteristics of Poverty Point is its huge bird mound, which was a gargantuan mound in the shape of a bird. The bulk of the mound still exists. The part that still exists is a good 75 feet off the ground. So it was a huge, huge edifice. And we were kind of curious about, it took a lot of effort to build that thing way back when. And the purpose, it turns out, we brought one of our mediums to that site, and I was really curious just to get her first impression standing atop of what remains of the mound. And first thing out of her mouth was weddings. That this was the union of the earth and the sky, and this is where the villagers, when they were to wed or commit, they would come to the top of the mound, and this is what would symbolize that connection. I thought that was just remarkable. And also the mound was a focal point for ET coming down. The ships wouldn't necessarily touch the mound, but they would hover above the mound, and then by other means, the occupants could descend, or if they were taking some of the villagers for a ride or something, and that's where they would ascend. So the mound was very active, and it's got a feel to it. I recall as this psychic and I and her husband were walking to the mound, she was describing what it was feeling like just approaching it, that it had tremendous energy still after all these thousands of years, and it increased as you approach the actual mound. And I was struck by the remaining field of energy many thousands of years after its prime.
Well, and I love the fact that it was positive energy too, because you hear those stories about like the Trail of Tears and how people who will experience some of the negativity that went along with that, on a firsthand basis if they, in those sorts of areas. So it's nice that it makes sense that there would be the opposite, but you don't always hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm curious. Go ahead. Well,
no, just something you said earlier about Rob, about the relationship. I think George will support me on this, but certainly in my life and George's life, I think the UFO phenomenon is a matter of interaction. Maybe not across the board, but with individual people. I think it's interaction between me and the UFO, or you and the UFO, or George and the UFO. I think the term relationship or interaction is very accurate. I don't know why, but I think it's very active.
Yeah. Have you followed the work of Stephen Greer at all?
Oh, yep. Yeah. We use his technique.
Oh, do you? The CE5?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
successfully, I might add.
Yeah. Yeah, he's fascinating. I love the story that he had about the guy whose hearing was cured by the ET.
No, I did. I'll tell you a story. George has one that's very similar. It might have been the same people, George. But I was out camping up in Utah. I mean, way back there on the reservation, and the place that I had selected looks out over the Navajo reservation, where it's just open land. There's no town, there's no farm, there's no road, there's no lights, nothing, just a canyon and dark. And I went through the Greer technique, which is basically I meditated on making contact. Then I visualized it. The universe, Milky Way, Sol Galaxy, Earth, Southwest, visualize that kind of a mental roadmap and ask for contact. And about 3:00 in the morning, I was on my cot and I just wide awake, woke up, boing, sat up in my cot, and what looked to be about a mile distant, I'm guessing on the distance, but there was a bright, full moon size, yellow glowing orb. The size of a quarter, held at arm's length. It was that far out. And the moon had set hours earlier. So I sat up and looked at it, and it was just hanging there. And I got up, it's cold, so I put on my jacket, walked around the side of my truck and was staring at it. So I was looking at it for a good 2-3 minutes. And my truck was open, and I looked at it some more, and it was just there. I said, I've got to take a picture of this. Gone.
Wow, that fast.
My impression is like, hey, Dan, this is for you. We're here. Keep up the good work, but you can't take our picture. Yeah. Same thing happened to George.
Oh, absolutely. I was getting, frankly, a little concerned, even though Dan and I are very conscientious about not projecting anything intentionally into whatever it is that we are researching or working with. Things were just really clicking. I mean, for the longest time, the right people were coming together. I mean, the right information was being provided. It was just rocking and rolling. So, of course, I got suspicious. Is it possible on a subconscious level, maybe, that Dan and I are kind of influencing, what's happening? Well, 7 a.m. the next morning, I get up, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I'm a morning person. Go into the den. Going to open up the curtains and the blinds, let the soon light from the dawn come in. And as I open up the curtains and open up the blinds, across the street, hovering above my neighbor's house, is at least a 30-foot diameter orange sphere. Huge. Wow. And I noticed that although it's a sphere, it's not a hard circumference. The edges of the sphere are kind of feathered, if you will. There's little bits of flicker and movement. And it was the damnedest thing. And I'm just studying this thing for a good 10 minutes. And then I go make some coffee. All right. and walk back by the window with the coffee, and it's gone. And at that moment, boom, something kind of popped, and it clarified that for whatever reason, I had been allowed to observe this orange sphere, proving that what Dan and I were experiencing is genuine. It is real. I mean, this is bright and early in the morning, so there's no other influences on what I'm perceiving. And then it kind of clarified that, however, I could study it all I wanted, but I couldn't take a photograph, and I couldn't step outside and look at it closer. And those were two thoughts that never came to my mind. And those you'd expect would be the first thing you want to do, step outside and look at it directly and, oh gosh, get the phone and get a photograph. Never, ever entered my mind. And that was their way of giving me a little taste of how they can influence some of our perceptions. It was very, very noticeable, but so incredibly subtle.
So I'm curious about, and I don't know if you get into this in the book, but because I'm looking forward to reading the Sky People one. When did things shift? Because if we were being visited by advanced civilizations, thousands of years ago or whatever the time frame was, and now, to get to the point where they'll show you something, but then they'll say you can't take our picture, and this is just for you. That strikes me as a shift. So, to what would you attribute that?
I can't answer that. They can maybe, but
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it could be a shift for. I think it would be an individual thing. Like it would be a shift for me and George. It might be a different shift for you, and a different shift for your different members of the audience. I think what was going on with George and I firmly believe that our current quest is spirit led.
Mm-hmm.
I think the spirits, for whatever reason, have selected George and me to pursue this work, and they have not manipulated, not controlled, but they have given us opportunities to pursue the areas that they want us to be pursuing. And I think that is it's a definite shift for two of us. I don't know that if it reflects on the world as a whole, but it's a definite shift for us because we're now exploring areas that I believe we're being spirit led.
Yeah. That makes sense to me because, what I'm perceiving from you and what I hear in your voice is a real reverence for what you're uncovering. And it's not like, some people are into these topics. You get that there's a different motivation. I'm not going to question what the motivation is necessarily, but it doesn't share the same professional approach, the same deliberate, triple blind, testing.
Yeah.
And it's more, a little more just freewheeling, for lack of a way to describe it.
Not so much freewheeling. I would use the phrase, we're using the pendulum as a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool. It's not entertainment. It's not games. It's a tool. And that's the way we treat it. And the information is that you would get from a tool.
Yeah. Your term of shifting is interesting because that makes me think of this all of a sudden. But what Georgia and I are at least teaching through our books is that you can experience your own shift. This is a way for you to experience your own shift and grow in the ways that perhaps are best for you to grow.
I like that. And it seems like it would attract the people who would ultimately share that same reverence. Because I have a friend who's a shaman and a medical intuitive, and she doesn't do it very much anymore because she grew very tired of people who would try to jam her appointment between their nails and their hair. They just weren't treating it. And those are her words, not mine, by the way. Yeah. And so, kudos to you guys for having that very, and that was one of the things that really, one of the reasons I was excited to, have you on, because there is that investigator, let's give this its, proper forum, if you will, and look at it with the right amount of respect and the right amount of, question. You're not just saying, oh, here, look, it's answering the question the way I want it to. It's you're checking it with mediums, and it's just really, I like the approach a lot.
Yeah, well, Dan and I are skeptics, okay, but we're open to the evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes sense, and it shows up. I want to be respectful of your time. What else should we know about you? How can people reach you, find your book? Feel free, promote.
Okay, well, go ahead, George. Go ahead.
All right, well, for me, the simplest thing would be just to touch base at my website. That's www.georgesewell, SEWELL.com. And that's got links to the books and buku articles and just all sorts of, some funky pictures too, by the way. There's stuff flying around that I occasionally get a photograph of.
Yeah, and all my books, fiction, nonfiction, especially, and the paranormal stuff, you can get those wherever you order your books. So, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever, wherever you order your books, they're available in ebook and in paperback. You can contact me with my email address, baldco@msn.com, which is on my website. Website's www.fournightspress.com. That's FOURKNIGHTS, fournightspress.com, or danbaldwin.com.
Excellent. Great. Yeah. Well, I really want, like I said, I want to acknowledge you for the great work you're doing, and thank you today, because it's been really fascinating. It's a real gift to talk to you.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll come back next year when we finish up the next book.
Good. Excellent. I would very much welcome that.
We're going way out there on this one. You'll love it.
Okay, good. I'm excited. Yeah. As soon as you have information on it, let me know. And
we'll do
to help you get the word out, I'm happy to do.
Appreciate it.
All right. Good deal. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. All right. For those of you who made it this far, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation. I can't wait for the third book together. That'll be great. We have other guests coming up, which will be very exciting. So definitely tune in for that. And I will say farewell for now, and to be continued.
It's all about trying to